Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is Andy Wood. He is the principal or the headmaster, depending on where you're from in the world, of the Green School in Cape Town, South Africa. So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about South Africa and the beauty of Cape Town, but we spend most of our time focused on the Green School and what exactly they are doing that's so different and becoming so world famous there. If you're unfamiliar with the Green School, this is basically a place where they teach kids in a very sustainable, forward-thinking, green, as you might expect, way, and kind of get the kids outside of the classroom and think a little bit differently and work through feedback loops. But it really caters to those families who are traveling, who want to hop from one place to the next, maybe spend 6 months in South Africa and 6 months in Bali and 6 months in New Zealand. They have green schools in these different locations and they're opening up more of them. So it's fascinating to learn not just how they're teaching the kids and the way they're going about that, but also how they're catering to the modern, nomadic, traveling family and people who want to go spend some time in some other places and give their kids a great education along the way. It was super interesting to hear how they're doing that at the Green School and how passionate Andy is about this. So we had a lot of fun. I really hope you'll like this one. Please help me in welcoming Andy to About Abroad. Hey, Andy, welcome to About Abroad. Thank you for stopping by. How's it going today?
Chase, thanks so much for inviting me to join your program. It's a real honor, and I'm excited to be part of your young and growing podcast.
Thank you. Well, I think people are going to be really interested to hear from you. The ones that listen to this show consistently have heard me say it before, that one of the questions I get asked the most is something along the lines of, somebody will say, hey, I love the show. I love what people come on here and talk about. That was cool when I was 20 because I could go travel and live wherever I wanted and bounce around to different countries. But now I'm a bit older. I've got kids and I can't take them out of school and put them in somewhere else. And there's just no way for me to do that. So I guess I'll just have to listen, right? And so I love debunking this myth that there is a way. And so anyway, I think it's going to be really interesting to dive into the Green School today.
Great, yeah, and we have a good number of international families who have come to join us, and I can share something of their story with you. And it's been fantastic to see those families join us from all around the globe.
Yeah. Well, it's the Green School as an entity is becoming very famous in this world of traveling families and people who want to live in some of these digital nomad hubs. So we'll get into all that. I think it would be great to set a little bit of the stage for the audience here. So I happen to know where you are. You're in Cape Town, South Africa, and that is where home is today and where you're from. But you've bounced around the globe a little bit, so maybe give us a little bit of context on your background, and then bring us back to where you are currently.
Yeah, so born and raised in Cape Town, went to school here, studied to become a teacher, and taught in local schools and very sort of traditional boys' schools with large rugby fields and a chapel in the middle, very much in that sort of British public school model. My dad went to such a school. I attended the school myself. So I've had a considerable sort of grounding in a liberal education. And then moved into school leadership, and that led into international baccalaureate schools. And I was the founding principal of the International School of Cape Town and established that in Hout Bay, and then spent 5 very happy years there. And then a door opened to go and live in Dubai. And I moved to the United Arab Emirates and headed up a big international school there. Not so big by American standards, 1,300 students, but by our standards, that was a big school. And a really fantastic experience. It was a truly international school, about 83 different nationalities there. And I really enjoyed the school, and as a professional opportunity, it was amazing. Dubai is a challenging country to live in. It's really flat and really hot. I'm a keen outdoorsy sort of guy. I love the mountains and I love the sea and the beach. And so I found it quite challenging to find sort of stuff to do on the weekends there. But professionally, it was a great opportunity. And international schools tend to fall into sort of one of two categories. They're sort of schools that are trying to be a little bit of the home country away from home. You know, an American school somewhere, or a British school somewhere, or a Japanese school somewhere. And then there are those schools that are wanting to be a truly international school and trying to be as multicultural as possible and welcome a really diverse range of students and families and so on. And my school was definitely in the second category, and we really, really enjoyed that. And then an opportunity opened up to go and live and work in Nassau, Bahamas, and I spent some time there. And then I got to hear Green School and the Green School movement, and this opportunity arose to be the founding principal of a new green school here in South Africa. So a little bit of the story there is that Green School Bali, I think, is really well known internationally. And many parents who've traveled there have stayed there for a while and thought, gee, we've got to go and establish Green School back home. And Alba and Herman Brunt, a local South African family, took their 3 daughters over there, and they had an absolutely inspirational, transformative time at Green School in Bali, and came back and said, we've got to start Green School South Africa. So it's one family's vision for starting Green School here. Michael and Rachel Perrett did a similar thing with Green School in New Zealand. And there's a Green School in New Zealand that opened up in Taranaki, a little town near New Plymouth. So Taranaki is a little town near New Plymouth, kind of on the western side of New Zealand. So there's 3 Green Schools around the world, one in the sort of the mothership in Bali, and then our 2 sister schools in New Zealand and South Africa. And yeah, we've been open for a year exactly. So it's been an incredible opportunity to design the campus, design the buildings, design the curriculum, everything about education for sustainability. So what kind of bricks should we use? How do you design plaster that is environmentally sensitive? How do we be as off the grid as possible when it comes to power generation? I'll talk about the campus design later, but every element of the campus very, very carefully designed to be as sustainable and off the grid as possible.
That is fascinating, and that was actually not a portion of the Green School story that I actually knew until I started prepping a little bit for this conversation. So that I found to be incredibly inspiring about Green School, when it's already an inspiring story because of what you guys are doing based on the curriculum and the flexibility that you offer families that are kind of coming and going. So maybe probably a large portion of the audience that just hasn't heard of Green School before, and so they don't even know the story behind Bali. So maybe we go back to the roots. I'm not really sure what you think, but that seems like a good place to go. And initially, let's kind of talk about the roots of Green School in Bali and what it's all founded on.
Yeah. So John and Cynthia Hardy are an entrepreneurial couple living in Bali. And probably, it must be about 12 years ago, John Hardy saw that movie, An Inconvenient Truth. And it really just gave him a call to conscience to say, we've got to do something about climate change and our impact on the planet. And let's do that through education. And linked to that, he began to read some education research published by a man called Alan Wagstaff, the 3 Springs book, but looking at just what works in terms of education. And so just with those 2 ideas in his mind, just founded a school quite unlike any other, and gathered around him an education team who are just absolutely committed to education for sustainability and to teaching and learning in a very 21st century skills, forward-thinking, innovative, student-centered, inquiry-based, hands-on, experiential way of learning. And so they founded the school. Perhaps a unique feature of the school is that the architecture of it, being in Bali, the whole school's made of bamboo, and none of the classrooms have walls.
Really?
So, being a tropical climate, a building in Bali has 4 posts in the corners and a roof to keep the rain off.
Wow. All
the kids run around barefoot. There are no school uniforms. And so it just has a very different feel to it. And that wall-less feeling permeates through all sort of elements of the curriculum. So there are no walls between the different subjects. And so subjects are taught in an integrated thematic kind of way, in which we're looking at links between mathematics and history and music and science and geography and agriculture, and wanting to see it, just how are things connected. I think our traditional model, you very much go to the maths lesson, you learn mathematics and prepare for the mathematics test, and then you leave and you go to history. And the one has no link to the other at all. Whereas at Green School, we very intentionally design a curriculum that is interwoven, and so that learning has context, it has meaning. And we want our children to understand, why am I learning this thing? Why is it important to know estimation and probability? And how would I ever use these thinking skills in real life? So it started as a relatively small school in Bali, and it has continued to grow over the 12 years. And now there's a teacher training element to it. There's Green School for grown-ups. There are camps that run from there. They've reached out to a large part of the Balinese population who come and attend the school too, because the core of the school in Bali is expats who go and live there and send their kids to school, use it as an educational experience for their children. And there are many people arrive there for a semester or 2 or 3 or 4 and have stayed there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, or however long, and have made Bali home. And
wow.
we're hoping that we're going to see a similar trend here as people come and discover South Africa or New Zealand and go and have an opportunity to just enjoy our fantastic country.
Is it true is there the idea of opening one in Tulum in Mexico too, or is that a rumor?
No, that's next on the cards. I know that COVID slowed things down a bit, but they're back on track. And I'm not quite sure of the opening date, but that is the next one that is on the cards.
Wow.
It's not yet open.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Something, I had somebody on the show a couple seasons ago, a friend of mine named Igor, who lived in Bali for 10 plus years. I don't remember exactly. And he was there towards the beginning of green school. And I don't remember exactly at what stage he got involved, but he was involved with starting the summer camps and things like that. And I think he's the one that really put it on my radar. But I was fascinated because he kind of jokingly, but I mean, seriously said like, yeah, rather than doing arithmetic on a whiteboard, we go out and we say, here's 4 coconuts, here's 3 coconuts. How many coconuts do you have? And that's the way the kids are learning. And I just thought, wow, that sounds so much more stimulating than sitting in a closed-in box in a room in a chair where everything looks the same every single day.
Yeah. The classroom that I attended all the way through school had the windows really high, so you couldn't see out of the classroom. Desk windows. You had to focus on your textbook in front of you and be quiet, sit still, pay attention now. But if you can teach the same concepts with a far more hands-on, experiential, inquiry-based model. Now, how many coconuts are there? What's the square root of the coconuts? What would happen if you had twice the number of coconuts? You could still teach the same concepts, but in a way that children would understand and remember a whole lot better.
Yeah. Could you elaborate a little more on what you meant about the integration of the subjects? I'm curious from a non-educator standpoint. I'm trying to envision what math and social studies and English class would have looked like if they were integrated and not separate. And I'm sure it's better.
So what identifies perhaps a theme for the term? Let's take, for example, in my school, we're working with one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and that would be responsible production and consumption. And so it's looking about what is ethical business and how do we produce and consume things ethically. And then how do we hang some of our mathematics problems around that? And that might be to do with data and data harvesting and statistics and so on, or numbers and estimation and probability and so on. We would then be looking at some science around that theme. And it might be to do with climate change and how would we track climate change and what data would we gather? How would we know that data to be relevant? How do we interrogate the truthfulness of the data that we have? And so you'd be looking at the science of climate change and how that might affect the agricultural production of cotton. Then from a geography point of view, they were studying tell me about t-shirts. So where's the cotton grown? And it's shipped to the mills. And then when it's made into cotton fabric, how is that then cut up and made into t-shirts? And then how is that distributed planet-wide? And how many tons of t-shirts are produced every year? And what happens to old t-shirts? Where do they go to die? And then we had a really fascinating lesson in which the children would look at the labels on t-shirts. And we had purchased for the school t-shirts that said made from recyclable material. But as they actually looked at the label and the fine print, they worked out, in fact, these were made from pretty much the same fabric that every other t-shirt was made from. So there was a lot of discussion about greenwashing and people who put, environmentally friendly and recyclable and so on all sorts of products that are definitely not recyclable. And how would you interrogate that? And so it was a fascinating discussion looking at the economics of t-shirt production, the agriculture of cotton farming, the mathematics of the costing of t-shirts. How could you produce a t-shirt for so many dollars? The science of climate change and how that might affect t-shirt production. So it all links together, and one's trying to create a thread in which you are still teaching fractions in mathematics, poetry in English, set work in literature, photosynthesis in science, but making sure that there's a story to it that puts context to learning.
Fascinating. And so this is quite different from the school system you grew up in. I'm guessing, and where you even got your start in your career. What attracted you to this type of opportunity? I mean, obviously it brought you back home, but I imagine you could have had plenty of opportunities to come back home if that was the draw. So there's something about the way the Green School's doing something different that it seems like probably attracted you.
So there's so much research to show that the traditional model of education is broken, and that raising children through a system which just simply makes sure you download a lot of information that children can memorize as much as possible to score marks or grades in tests and quizzes, and that marks quality education. And that we download as much information as we can into kids' brains and make sure that they've got very long examinations to write, so that they can get percentages from 6-hour exam. Then we've done a really brilliant job. And we know that model doesn't work, and we know that research shows that high school kids worldwide, about 70% report being bored at school. They're just not engaged with the system and certainly not preparing children for success at college and success of the workplace in the future. And in education, we read this research all the time and think, well, what can we do differently and how can we do it? And here's an opportunity to start afresh and to say, how do we teach? What does success look like? What are our core skills and values? And how do we teach our students at Green School to be creative, to think critically, to see things in systems, to see themselves as agents of positive change, to know themselves well enough, so know thyself, so that you can then be a positive influence on the world around you, to be able to be adaptable and flexible and cope with uncertainty. And boy, has COVID taught that over the last couple of years. And those skills, which we would call, some would call them 21st century learning skills, are at the heart of what we're wanting to do. And long after you've forgotten the life cycle of a T-shirt that is made in China, you will have remembered those research skills and the problem-solving skills and the presentation skills you learned along the way. When you stand up in a boardroom in the future, or whether you're selling secondhand surfboards on Maui Beach, whatever you choose to do, that you've learned a set of skills that prepare you to succeed in the world of the future.
The audience can't see it, but I can. I mean, it lights your face up talking about it. It's clear that you're very passionate about your work.
I love it.
Guilty as charged. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think most of us sitting here, I think I'm in my 30s, and like for instance, just I'm living here in Spain. I took some Spanish classes, and I went down one line of education for a little while that was basically just prepping me for a test to get a certification that I don't need. I mean, I'm just studying the language just for I would much rather learn how to speak than to pass some arbitrary test that's not really useful in the streets. And I was reminded during that process of like, this really reminds me of every end of year, end of grade testing that I ever went through during my schooling system, which was just basically just learning how to pass a test and then discharging that information out of my brain right afterwards. And so I can just envision being at one of the green schools, how you would kind of be digging your fingers into the content a little bit more. It seems seems much more hands-on. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This season is brought to you by my good friends over at Insured Nomads. They're the absolute best in the business when it comes to providing health, travel, and medical insurance for nomads, expats, and really just all forms of world travelers. I know insurance is often something that's overlooked when we're fantasizing about traveling the world, but it's absolutely necessity that we address this, because often the policy you have in your home country isn't going to cover you while you're abroad. And it's also a requirement, as a lot of people may not realize, to actually buy private travel or expat insurance, as it's called sometimes, to obtain a visa or even enter certain countries. So fortunately, there are companies like Insured Nomads to help us with this. Not only do they have excellent coverage and great prices, but they're also providing a first-class experience with additional perks and best-in-class technology via their app. It's an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. Now, this is a company that was built by world travelers for world travelers. So they know what it's like to find yourself in a difficult medical situation abroad, and they want to keep you from having that same bad experience. So the next time you're planning a trip abroad, whether it's for a week or a lifetime, check out Insured Nomads via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, if you're still around and enjoying this episode, then I think you might actually like our once a month newsletter as well. If you'd like to sign up, just open up the show notes of the episode you're currently listening to, scroll down, and look for aboutabroad.com/newsletter. It takes about 30 seconds to sign up. It's a fantastic way to support the show, and I think you'll be pleased with the information that we provide every month as well. Okay, now back to the episode. Is the schooling system based on any kind of more well-known philosophy? Like I'm not really well schooled in this area, but like Montessori or something like that, or is it its own thing?
I think in terms of its teaching methodology, you'd find it pretty close to the International Baccalaureate Primary Years program. As we move into the high school, we're writing an American high school diploma. So we begin to amass credits in grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, and we're putting together sufficient credits to get that diploma together. And we're in the process of being accredited by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. So there is that college readiness, university readiness element at the end of the process. So what we teach is very similar to any other school anywhere. How we teach it and how we assess it is very different. So we're moving away from tests and marks to giving really good feedback. And behind that is a growth mindset. So instead of saying, gee, Chase, I'm really sorry you failed the test, you got 45%. Andy, you passed the test, you got 51%, well done. And then Chase goes home and thinks, well, I failed the test. That must mean I'm useless at mathematics. It's evidence that I'm stupid. Whereas if you reframe it to say, this is difficult work and you didn't get it right the first time. So let's have a look at where you went wrong and let's see where we identify where you made those mistakes and let's see if we can get it right the next time. And then the feedback to parents is we've been dealing with, I don't know, three-dimensional objects in mathematics. Your son or daughter has really understood squares and cubes, but hasn't quite got cylinders yet. So let's work together on understanding the volume of cylinders. Now that's information you can do something about.
Yeah, exactly. There's a feedback loop there.
C for mathematics, pleasing progress. Well, that doesn't tell you anything at all. And then what we are working on too, and this is a work in progress, is co-constructing assessment rubrics. So I was sitting in an English class recently, grade 8 English, and they were working on their literature essays. And the teacher was explaining, how would we assess the literature essay? So what would be the elements of it that need to be there? Well, introduction, body, conclusion. You need to be able to construct the line of logic. You need to be able to describe what's happening. And then how would we know that you've sort of done this really well, you've done it okay, you're near to it, or you've completely off the mark? And let's write those statements together so that the students have had a voice not only in designing the learning journey, but in designing the assessment rubric, which means they go into the assessment knowing this is exactly what's going to be expected of me. When you did your car driver's license, you knew, well, I'm going to need to be able to parallel park. I've got to be able to do a hill start. There are a number of skills I know I'm going to be able to demonstrate. And you can practice those so that you're able to demonstrate them. Similarly, really authentic assessment enables the student to show what they know and that there's not that sense of unexpectedness. I don't know if you felt like I did when I went into exams, but I had this gnawing worry that they'd find out how stupid I really was. And they'd find those little nuggets of information I'd forgotten to learn. And that the job of the examiner was to sort of cast a searchlight into my brain and to find out, he hasn't learned about thunderstorms, or he hasn't learned about earthquakes or whatever. Right, let's ask a question about that. So it's creating positive assessment frameworks that allow children to show what they know. And it's in a positive feedback loop so that you can say, right, if you want to improve your grade, this is the stuff you need to work on. So what are the next steps in learning? So giving feedback in that kind of way. And yes, further down the line, there will need to be grades and as we get into the high school diploma, and that does need to become more rigorous. And there is a place for quizzes and tests, but there's also a place for science experiments. There's also a place for English essays. There's also a place for doing poster presentations or verbal presentations. So we assess in a wide variety of ways.
I love it. What's interesting is that, in what I've come to know about the Green School, I actually did not realize that there would be so much information here that was actually on the surface pretty similar to a regular school that most students are attending, where there are courses and classes like mathematics and geography and geology and things like this that other students are learning too. Because I think what people get wrapped up in is, and maybe what we could go to next, is some of the more alternative aspects of the school, like for instance, kids growing the food that they're going to eat at lunch the next day. And so I wonder if you can kind of take us on to the other side of the Green School and some of these more, I don't know, extreme might not be the right word, but some of these things that you really don't get at another school at all.
Yeah, so there are all sorts of learning opportunities. So one of the beautiful features of Green School South Africa is that we're located in the winelands about 50 miles from Cape Town. So we're surrounded by beautiful vineyards, purple mountains. It's absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. The majority of our school grounds are gardens, and we have vegetable gardens. We've got fruit gardens everywhere, and the children are involved in planting all the plants or the veggies, out there tending them. We've got a little chicken coop, and they harvest the eggs every day. And today I watched a group of kids harvesting tomatoes, bell peppers, and beans. Yeah, there's a whole lot of beans coming in. And there are 10 types of beans growing there. And we serve a healthy vegetarian lunch each day. And the food that's harvested that day is put into the lunch. And so the children know they harvest all the food that we eat every day. Of course, in reality, we have to buy some extras in because we don't really grow enough. But there's that real sense of seed to table. And along the way, there was an opportunity today to stop and talk about the bees that had moved into the basil bush. And they just love the flowers in the basil bush. There are 5 or 6 types of bees gathering around there. And there was just a long discussion about bees and butterflies around the basil bush. And, well, how many bees are there? Would you say there are 10 or 100 or 1,000 or a million or a zillion? And, how would we estimate that? So there was a really good mathematics conversation there. There was a discussion about natural pesticides and herbicides and companion species planting. So we planted marigold flowers in between the veggies because they exude a kind of chemical from their root that frightens some of the aphids away. So just how do we, in a sustainable, permaculture, responsible way, manage pests and things that want to come and eat all the veggies. The children were involved in working out the length and breadth of each flower bed, and there was a food growing competition. So we had to weigh how many pounds or kilograms of onions and tomatoes and carrots and broccoli had we grown, and what grows most quickly. And through that, they're learning about seasons. And then there's a long discussion about why are leaves green?
What? That's a fantastic question to try to answer.
Yeah, I mean, why aren't they blue or brown or red? And why would they turn red and yellow at the end of the year? And what happens there? So there's a long discussion. So much learning can happen out there. What also happens then, the kids get out of the classroom quite regularly, which means they keep moving and active. And I've got no doubt with the blood flowing around, it keeps your brain happier. And in fact, you learn better. We see relatively few behavioral incidents in the life of the school. And I think the amount of walking they do around the grounds and space really helps to that very calm, tranquil atmosphere that pervades the school. It's got a very special atmosphere, a great vibe to it. And it just, as you walk in, you just sense this peacefulness to the place. So we have a recycling center on site, and we have a zero waste to landfill policy in our school. So, for example, after lunch, all the food scraps are scraped into a little bowl and they're taken down to the compost heap and are made into compost, which will be put into the flower beds for the next season. Paper's recycled, and kids are learning that there are 9 different types of plastic, and not all plastic can be recycled, and it all has to be sorted out very, very carefully. So there's a lot of learning that happens there. We generate solar power on site, and there's an app which one can download on one's computer or phone, and you can see exactly how much solar power is generated, and you can compare a hot summer's day to an overcast day to a rainy day, and is that meeting our power needs? And what's really interesting for the kids to see is when the kitchen starts preparing lunch, our power spikes upwards, and so for the kids to see just the daily routine of our power production and consumption. Lots of interesting science and mathematics around that too. We have a sewage recycling plant on site. All the water we pump up from a local river, we store in dams, and it gets spread out over the site. So essentially, we're harvesting more water from the site than we're using. We're generating our solar power on site. You'll never be completely off-grid, but we're wanting for the children to see just how it is possible to live off-grid as much as you can. And for example, when we buy the vegetables for our kitchen, we ensure they don't come in plastic packets. And we've had just a lengthy process with the suppliers to ensure that they're all delivered in wooden boxes or crates, which they can take back and reuse.
Wow. They're getting so much education just by osmosis, just by seeing that and witnessing that that's how the food is delivered, not as opposed to getting it in a plastic bag, for instance, from the grocery store. I remember a really kind of like funny but sort of sad moment being around a younger child who said to us that they didn't understand that meat didn't come from the grocery store, and that it, just didn't think beyond that part of the supply chain. And I remember thinking like, wow, that totally got missed. You're 12 or 14 years old or something. And that didn't get covered in school somewhere along the way. And so anyway, the kids at the Green School are witnessing the process in a natural standpoint, which I think is really, really amazing.
I mean, the 5th graders had to design the chicken house. We bought 8 chickens. For the first 2 weeks, they didn't lay any eggs at all. There was an enormous amount of research done into why they were shy layers. Turns out, I think that a lot of kids running around make a lot of noise, and that distracts the chickens. And we discovered that it's only when it was quiet over the weekend that they started laying eggs. But they've settled into their routine. But they've also learned that you've got to give the chickens water every day, and they need to be fed 7 days a week. And who's going to look after them Saturdays and Sundays? And a whole lot of life lessons about being responsible for something.
Yeah, that's the way you learn later in life. Is you pick up skills as you go. You see things, you learn things, and you apply them to real life. And I think with the fixed curriculum that a lot of us are fed, there's just not a lot of room for that. It's mostly just taking in what you're given, and there's not a lot of room for flexibility. And so I think that's what's very attractive to the people that I've talked to that have sent kids to the Green School. That's something that's very attractive to them, I think, for their children.
So perhaps just to talk about some of our international families, and these are families who've relocated, just some of their experiences, that it is certainly possible, particularly with younger kids. And we're perhaps talking about sort of elementary school up to grade 10, 11, so ages 10, 11, and 12, grade 4, 5, and 6, to go and spend a semester, 3 months or 6 months or a year in another school in another country. What's involved is ensuring that you found a school that's got a similar ethos to your school. I think everybody's worried that if I leave my current education system for a year, kids will hit Control-Alt-Delete, their entire memories will be erased. They will arrive back complete numbskulls, and they won't ever catch up. There's that sense of you've got to keep on the treadmill, and if you get off the treadmill, you'll never get back on. They will certainly learn a whole lot of language skills, mathematics skills, science skills in any context, anywhere. And, I'd encourage people to travel, because living in different cultures and different climates and eating different food teaches you so much. And the experience of a family, of just having to travel together, will really draw you close together. Inevitably, as a family, you will end up spending more time together, because you will have to spend your weekends together going, if you live in Cape Town or Paarl, the beaches are beautiful. The walks on the mountains are amazing. We've got mountain biking trails and trail running here, and rock climbing and hiking and sailing and sea kayaking and kiteboarding and surfing. So if you're into outdoor sports, this is one of the places to be. I think what Whistler is to Canada, Canterbury is to New Zealand, Cape Town is to South Africa. It's just a really outdoorsy kind of place. So you'll spend a lot of time just doing those things together as a family. Your children will learn plenty of mathematics and science. They will return far, far the richer for it. They will not have forgotten how to learn. On the other hand, they will have learned how to learn, and they will catch up very, very quickly when they return to your home country. My family, we lived abroad for a while too, and it certainly has created for them a real hunger to engage with and live in different cultures. Often it is our human nature to think that people like me are good. People who are different to me must be weird or strange or different. And then when you live in different cultures, you just realize, well, yeah, I have my funny tastes in food and my particular tastes in music or clothing, and that's just a product of where I come from. And wasn't it amazing to go and live in India and eat Indian food and just to enjoy a different culture? And the food's very different to back home. And wasn't it wonderful? And to just appreciate your home culture and to appreciate other cultures and to really engage with those people, not as a tourist staying in a luxury hotel, driving a bus around a city, but really having met people. And I'd really encourage you to do that. Some of the logistical side of it is you need to organize your visas and passports and so on, and you need to ensure that you've got rights to live as a temporary resident or permanent resident of the country. The children, if they're coming to South Africa, they will need study permits, and parents, there are different ways to organize a visa to stay here, study visas, different categories of visas, but you need to organize that. That would apply to any country, and always best to apply from outside of South Africa, so when you arrive on the correct visa. It's very difficult. Probably the same in the United States too, to arrive on a tourist visa and want to change to a work visa. The government looks fondly upon that. So organize all of that well in advance. You would need to budget, but South Africa's currency is really, really weak. So dollars go extremely far. So if I'm thinking a really nice burger in a good restaurant will cost $8.
Oh, wow. That's good. That's not bad at all. And do you happen to know anything like does the Green School help facilitate that at all for international families? Or do you happen to know off the top of your head sort of what the general rules are about entry and exit? And is that something that can normally be facilitated, or is it quite a challenge?
Yeah, so we're in touch with some agencies who specialize in visas and will help families secure visas. We don't do that as a school, but we'll put you in touch with people who can support you with doing that. You would obviously need to budget that to rent a home. You'd need to buy a car. You really do need to own a car if you're living in this country. Public transport isn't good, and you do need to have reliable transport. And then a question often asked about this country is, well, what about safety and crime and so on? And as with traveling anywhere, particularly in the third world, you've just got to have your eyes open. A lot of crime is opportunistic. So I wouldn't leave my briefcase and wallet in my car visible when I went into the shops. I wouldn't leave my front door and gate wide open while I went out to walk the dog. So just don't leave your possessions or things just within easy access of somebody who thinks, oh, I quickly grab that wallet over there. There are parts of town you don't want to go after dark on a Friday night. But for most part, life goes on as it does anywhere in the world. And, I walk my dog in the park every evening, and I go down to the beach in the afternoon, and love taking my kids for a hike on the mountain. So, but you're aware that they're just places where you would just be careful about in the world.
Yeah, and you've seen a bit of the world too. So I mean, it's not as if you've just lived in South Africa your whole life and you're coping with something there. You know what it's like, and so that's I think that is good perspective, especially I would imagine for families who are looking at places to perhaps relocate for a semester or something. They're going to be very concerned with safety as opposed to someone who's maybe a little more young and adventurous and not so concerned with that. So, and actually that does bring me to a question I meant to ask you earlier, but can you talk a little bit more about the family that does that sort of makes this a temporary stop? Because I think that is something that differentiates the Green School from some other types of schools. where that's sort of normal. If I understand correctly, you have people that are sort of transient, coming and going, perhaps even going from one green school to the next in succession. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your perspective on that.
So Green School Bali relies almost 100% on expats coming to stay for a semester or a year or a number of years. And often people stay a lot longer than perhaps they first planned to. Here in South Africa, and I think the case is very similar to New Zealand, the majority of people are locals who are sending their kids to an alternate school for an alternate model of education. But we have I think we're probably at about 15% international families. And they just add such a richness to our school culture. And there's Spanish conversations and Portuguese conversations and Dutch conversations. And it's just great to have those folk on campus. By and large, they set up a business that can operate remotely, and whether it's for 3 months or 6 months or a year or longer. We're still a relatively young school, but we find that those families really enjoy the experience of living abroad. Opportunities open up in the new country. And so they've really, really enjoyed it. Others have said, look, we're coming for 3 months and at the end of it, we're headed home. And that's worked well too, and we welcome those families.
Okay, all right, great. Yeah, that's what I've heard that quite a bit, which I think is something that's really, really nice to know, that they're welcomed. Because I feel like in a lot of school systems, if I showed up with my kids and it's just and you just said, hey, look, I'm here for 3 months. I mean, I don't know what kind of experience the kids are going to get thrown into that environment. But if they're in an environment where this is sort of normal, there is some transientness, there is a welcoming environment for that, and then also for those families that want to go, say they want to switch back and forth between Bali and South Africa or Bali and New Zealand, they have that option. And I think there's something very satisfying about that, something sort of calming.
And we have a coffee shop on campus with a co-working space with the great Wi-Fi, great coffee, great food. So we want parents not just to drop the kids off at the gate and head off down the road, but to come in, have a cup of coffee, work from there. We've got a great parent community called The Seed. And it's just a community of like-minded people sharing lifestyle ideas, yoga classes, entrepreneurial ideas. And we want to just facilitate those rich conversations between our families on campus. And so that's a big feature, that through your kids on campus, you'll get to meet some really interesting people who share a similar perspective on parenting and life and adventure.
Wow. Oh, yeah. That sounds kind of like the dream for a lot of young parents, I think, listening to this, is because you're getting that community of like-minded people. You're kind of finding your tribe a little bit, and then you're also putting your kids in a situation where you know that they're going to thrive. So it sounds very idyllic in a lot of ways. Is there anything else on the Green School? I want to ask you a couple more questions about South Africa and Cape Town, but is there anything else on the school experience that you feel like we didn't get to that would be good for people to share? We didn't go into any details about pricing or acceptance and entry and things like that. I don't know if you want to get into any of that, but if there's anything else, it'd be great to share.
Anything more about the school, our website is www.greenschoolsa.co.za. Just put Green School South Africa in your search engine. All the information about the school is there. Click on the admissions tab. You'll see all the pricing. As I said, our South African currency is relatively weak to the dollar. So by international school standards, it's pretty good value. And just pop us an email and come and visit us.
Sounds great. I think you probably will have some About Abroad listeners that will do just that. I know from the emails that I get that this sounds right up the alley of a lot of them. Before I let you go, I would love to just hear a little bit more about South Africa. We've never covered South Africa on the show, and I have not been to South Africa, so I have very little perspective except the beautiful pictures I've seen of your coastline and Cape Town and some of the things that a lot of the world knows. But could you just talk a little bit about you touched on it a little bit, but just a little bit more about some of the beauty of the country and the city of Cape Town, and kind of what brought you back there?
Yeah, so Cape Town's one of those cities that is built around a mountain and around some beautiful beaches. So there must be 100 different breathtaking beaches around Cape Town. The surfing here is fantastic. The diving is wonderful. My wife is a very keen sailor, and there's a very active sailing club out of the yacht club here in Cape Town. I enjoy rock climbing, mountaineering. Through the mountain club, I got involved with mountain rescue. So that's been a big part of my life. So it's a beautiful city. And perhaps, I don't know what California is to America, Cape Town is to South Africa. It just attracts those kinds of people. And so there's incredibly good restaurants and live music and coffee shops and a really rich music scene in town and a good drama scene in town. And then, just perhaps 40, 50 miles from the city center are just these beautiful wine farms. And it's wine farming country. So you're in the Napa Valley. Only our wines are just a little better.
Yeah, of course.
Although you probably want to test them and to see if that that assumption is true, and we'd have to decide how would we know what a good wine is. And like good all learners, you'd have to set an experiment, decide what's the correct sample size.
There's mathematics and everything. That sounds like my kind of class. You sign me up for the wine tasting. I'm in.
So there's a strong coffee culture. There's a strong art and music culture in town. It's very much a global melting pot, not only from people around the globe, but from people in Africa. And you'll find lots of people here from Zimbabwe and Malawi and the Sudan and all around Africa, as people come here seeking economic opportunities. I think perhaps for international travelers, South Africa, like so much of the third world, poverty and wealth is very close by. One of the things that perhaps might strike you is just how one sees those people just up really close, but they're incredibly entrepreneurial and will set up a coffee shop or a small business on the street corner and be making a living. And just know that your tourism dollars provide so many of those little informal traders, the guy who runs the coffee shop, the guy who's selling fruit on the street corner, provides those people with a living. And your tourism dollars really trickle through an economy that benefits just so many people.
That sounds like a wonderful way to invest your tourist dollars, folks. I hope to make a trip down there. My wife and I have talked for a long time about making a winter escape from the northern hemisphere down there. What's the temperature and what's the highs in the winter?
And the highs of winter. So in your winter today, it would be about 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, and then the nights would drop down to about 20. So yeah, you just need a t-shirt and pair of shorts, and you're away. Old Town has windy weather, so the wind can pick up and the weather can change very, very quickly. So in the trunk of my car, I've got a hat and a rain jacket and a wind jacket, and just in case the weather, it's unpredictable.
4 seasons in a day. You got to be prepared. 30 degrees, that's about 85 or so, I guess. So imagine 85 degrees Fahrenheit in February. It sounds like a nice place to go put the kids in school. Andy, I know you have things to do, and I want to let you go, so I won't keep you any longer. If there's anything else you want to share with the audience, please go for it. We will link to the website and any other links that you provide in the show notes, so that will all be available at a quick click. But anything else you want to share before I let you go, please go for it. Otherwise, thank you. This has been amazing.
Chase, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you, and I've really enjoyed the time and look forward to meeting you if and when you come to visit. And anybody who listens to the show, please give us a shout, and we'd love to talk to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.